The idea of retrieving information from short-term memory especially has a few terms that we should get into. One is a parallel search, and your author gives clever examples. If you compare Toy Story 3 with all the titles in your list, if you're searching for a DVD, that's parallel. No matter what the number of titles is, you examine them all at the same time, and theoretically it takes you no more time to compare Toy Story 3 with one title than with 10 other titles or 200. So a figure 4a, as we'll get to here in a second, depicts that. Another sort of search, it would be a serial search. In our movie titles examples among all the DVDs that may be in your collection, this would be comparing Toy Story 3 with the first movie, then the second, etc. The comparisons are done one at a time, and in this model, the longer the list is, the longer it should take to decide whether that movie, Toy Story, matches a title on that list. So successful searches are indicated by a yes line and unsuccessful at a no line. So a third sort is self-terminating. We can also ask whether the search is self-terminating or exhaustive. In other words, you keep going even after you've found it. A self-terminating search stops when a match is found. So suppose the list of movies is Citizen Kane, Titanic, Toy Story, and The Big Chill. If you do a self-terminating search, you will stop after the third comparison because you found a match. So these take less time, of course. So the question is, which one of these is correct? And it's the far right one in your book, where the size of the memory set suggests that it will take longer to find the party that you're looking for, in this case, that particular DVD. So theoretically predicted results from the Sternberg short-term memory scanning experiment, where yes and no refer to whether the participant will report finding a probe letter in a memory set. A is parallel, B is self-terminating, and C depicts something called a serial exhaustive search. So what is that? The data that Sternberg looked most like a serial exhaustive search. Can we define that? This serial search that's exhaustive means that even if a match is found, you continue looking through every other item in the set in this letter finding example. In our example, this would mean that even after you find the Toy Story, you check the remaining titles on the list. With this kind of search, it takes just as long for successful searches as unsuccessful searches, depending on how many there are. And why is that? Well, as counterintuitive as that is, in other words, a sort of a who'da thunk it, Saul Sternberg, and by the way, they're contrasting him with the Robert Sternberg at Cornell, that's the intelligence expert. Saul Sternberg's results argue for serial exhaustive searches, the way we retrieve information from short-term memory. His explanation is that the search process itself may be so rapid and have such momentum that it's hard to stop. And from a processing point of view, it may be more efficient just to let the search process finish and then make one decision at the end instead of making several decisions, one after each item. And this may be a suggestion of that people with better working memories are better at this sort of task to begin with. So we wouldn't expect that. Now, with the DVD example, it's kind of silly. It's not so analogous to what he had them do with a letter finding experiment or a number finding experiment in which they had to memorize long strings of letters or numbers. It's not perfectly analogous, but your author has attempted to sort of slow it down and offer a more relatable example, if that makes sense. So if there were an item on the test, we would say, well, gosh, which one of these is recommended? It's called a serial exhaustive search. And again, what that is essentially you keep looking even past the point where you found the answer. And therefore, the number of entities or entries into the memory set, whether it's 6 or 100, will determine how long it takes to arrive at a yes. And that's what's depicted in letter C there. So, and again, as reviewed by Hunt in 1978 and others, you can see some of these articles are pretty old. People of all sorts with exceptionally good memories are the best at these sort of retrieval performance. Showed results consistent with the idea that retrieval from short-term memory uses a serial exhaustive search. although search rate changes with the group being faster for people with very, very good memories and slower for people that have aged a little bit, that are maybe 65 or older. So that's the idea. There is an alternative explanation for Sternberg's findings, of course. An intriguing twist on Sternberg's study came from DeRosa and Kaz, who demonstrated that with certain kinds of picture stimuli, apparently it's more parallel. So if I'm attempting to retrieve a number or a letter, in that case, we're probably looking at a serial exhaustive search that keeps going because we can't stop it even past the point where we found it. On the other hand, if it's a picture or something that could be more visually discerned, in that case, it would be more likely to be parallel in that case. Now, again, I would refer you back to the chapter where it describes the task in which a number or a letter is sought after. It's not exactly perfectly analogous to searching for DVDs in your collection. So, summarizing then, the general picture that emerged during the 60s and 70s was that short-term memory is a short-term limited capacity storehouse where information is coded acoustically, like our LWK or PZC example from the CogLab video, and maintained through rehearsal, which we would expect. Information can be retrieved from the storage using high-speed serial exhaustive search. In other words, I just keep going even past the point where I've found it because it can't be stopped. And the nature of the information in short-term memory, however, can affect capacity in the processing of stored information.